Hey, Curious Out Loud. Welcome to our episode today. This is Tig,
This is Tiff.
and we are so excited to be bringing to you an interview that we conducted with the amazing Coco Layne. She literally blew our minds during this interview, and I'm going to let Tiff speak a little bit more about Coco, how she knows her. But this is the very first interview that we did. We did this a few months ago when we were looking at Curious Out Loud and what we wanted it to be. And so this is a pre-recorded interview, but we're super excited to be sharing it with you. And there's definitely lots of good stuff in there.
Beautiful. Thank you. I have a personal stake in this episode because Coco is one of my bestest friends, and we kind of this is the inaugural interview that we're releasing, but I feel like we had the inaugural coming out and being gay together, over a decade ago after high school. And so these interviews will be available on anywhere podcasts live and YouTube as well. So if you want to share these, invite people to the group, because that's what this community is about, to have these conversations, but also we'll have them available for you in all other platforms so that you can share the gift that we received from Coco. So Coco is a long time friend of mine from high school. We actually weren't really that friendly in high school, but afterwards we kind of magnetized towards each other for some reason, found each other and explored the world of queerness and gayness, what that meant for us. And then we both moved to the East Coast. I moved to Boston. She moved to New York. And every time that we caught up, and you'll hear this in the interview, is that I saw someone who was living authentically as themselves. And that's what Coco showed me. So when we thought about Curious Out Loud, Tig and I, Coco was the first person that I had in mind in terms of who I wanted to hear from, because it seemed like every single milestone in my life as someone who was coming out and learning what authenticity meant to me, and learning what being queer meant, learning what LGBTQIA is, learning about all those movements, Coco was always the go-to person. And I didn't necessarily have to ask her what things meant or what things were. She just embodied transformation. She embodied love and healing. And at points of our journey together, like in life, it's been such an honor to see her grow. And so what was surprising to me about this episode was I thought we were going to talk about advocacy and activism and things, like gathering people together, but we ended up talking about personal responsibility and personal advocacy, because we asked the question, what do you think that we should all do to help support the communities that need support? And she's like, basically advocate for yourself, be responsible for you, and so much healing can come from that. And so
that was one big thing that stood out to me. I remember kind of being blown away because the question I asked is, how do you think we can best advocate for one another? And she said the way that we can best advocate for one another is teaching each other how to advocate for ourselves. And that idea of personal responsibility and stepping up and taking responsibility for ourselves is huge. And I was kind of shocked and taken aback by that response, but I found it to be absolutely incredible.
Yeah. So with that, I want you to listen to the episode. So I don't want to say too much, but I just want to say that I am grateful. Coco is one of my very best friends. She continues to be an inspiration for me and for the people I know around me. She embodies manifestation, living out your dream, doing what the hell you want to do to live your life. She's amazing. Follow her on all her social media platforms. You can find her on Coco Layne at Instagram, and the rest is history.
Yeah, that's awesome. We'll also put her contact information in the episode details so you can find her there. But enjoy the episode. We really enjoyed the interview, and we hope that you get as much out of it as we did.
Hey y'all, it's Tiff and Tig, and we have our first guest ever on Curious Out Loud, and this guest is very special to me. Her name is Coco Layne, and Coco, say hi.
Hi, everybody.
Great to be here. Yes, Coco, how do you identify?
I identify as queer. Can you tell us a little bit more about identifying as queer?
I think queer just gives me the space to move around and change because I feel like identity is very fluid for me. So identifying as queer gives me room to just play and, like, be myself, you know?
Yeah.
Because there's so much that comes with identifying as a lesbian or this or that, you know? So, like, queer feels good for me.
And what are your pronouns or pronoun?
I use she, her, they, them. They, them on paper.
Okay. Is there a reason for that?
Sticking it.
Yeah, I mean, that's an answer.
No, I'm just kidding. I mean, again, there's so many things that come with she, her. Like, I don't like it when people place womanhood on me, or like when people call me lady or woman. It's kind of like, I'm not.
We'll get more into that because I'm really curious about your thoughts on some of that stuff that you just said. And before we do, I just want to give a proper introduction about who you are in my life. Coco and I went to high school together, but we like crossed paths. I kind of knew you were a little gay. I don't know. There was like, you have a sense. I feel like.
I mean, I just have radiate gay aura.
Cats and like you know. So, but after we graduated high school, we kind of found each other somehow. I don't even know.
We're a magnet. We were just destined to be gay together. The universe gave us each other to journey into the realm of queerness together.
Yes.
Like, we needed each other.
So, again, we kind of were gaybies together, as we would call it. We were little babies who were being gay. And then Coco moved to New York. I moved to Boston, and we saw each other once in a while after that. But every time I saw you, Coco's a creative. I don't know how you would label yourself. I'm going to give you a chance to do that, but I'm labeling you right now as my friend. But every time I saw you, I felt like you were doing something in the community of what we would call like LGBTQIA, or just really like exploring parts of yourself each time. And sometimes it was like sadness, sometimes it was anger, sometimes it was joy. Like it depended on like the phase in your life at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And I really looked up to you because you were brave enough to explore those parts of yourself, and it inspired me every time I saw you to go deeper. And I also looked to you as someone who advocated for people and mostly for yourself, which I thought was really important because I think that there was a conversation about how there was a lack of representation for people who look like us and or were like us, and you put yourselves in vulnerable positions to like advocate. And so I want to thank you for being that inspiration to me. And I want to hear more about like what you do. So what do you do in life right now?
I manifest dreams. That's what I do with life. That's what I do. I do that for myself. I make music. I create art, visuals. I also do that for beauty brands. So I'm a creative director for a couple of beauty brands. And I just want to make everyone's dreams come true, you know?
Yeah.
Because it's like, you can't do it by yourself. I mean, you can, but it's hard to just do it by yourself. So it's really important for me to collaborate with other people and to, like, co-create together, you know?
For sure. So
that's amazing. I have a question about something you said. You said that when you would go and hang out at these bars that you were nervous all the time because it wasn't performance, it was real.
Yeah.
And I saw a quote the other day that really struck me. And it says,
queer people don't grow up as ourselves. We grow up playing a version of ourselves that sacrifices authenticity to minimize humiliation and prejudice. The massive task of our adult lives is to unpick which parts of ourselves are truly us and which parts we've created to protect ourselves. How do you feel about that?
Oh, I saw that. I almost posted that on my story. I totally saw that.
I posted it on my story.
It's been floating around Instagram. I saw that and was like, I bookmarked it, but I didn't repost it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is survival. Like when you realize you're queer, or when you realize you don't fit into what straightness is or heteronormativity is in like at a young age, you out of fear you shrink yourself or you alter yourself to match what other people are doing so that you don't end up being ostracized. Often our consequences for being different, being othered in different ways, like. So I totally feel that way. But the thing is that I feel like I am really privileged because I'm conventionally attractive. I feel comfortable in my gender performing femininity. So it wasn't like a huge contrast for me.
Right.
I think for me I'm really privileged because I can fit in. If I'm hanging out with straight people, like I don't stick out like a sore thumb. I mean, I don't ever feel super uncomfortable being in straight spaces, where it might be different for somebody else.
Right.
I've never really felt ostracized or like I've had the privilege of not punished for being gay in many spaces I've been in. Even with, my family knowing that I'm gay has been a different story. But even then, like, it's been pretty supportive for me because my family's pretty, like, open to that kind of stuff. To like queerness.
Yeah.
I'm Taiwanese. In Taiwan, it's legal to get married, and being gay is not like a taboo thing. It's pretty open. Like people are pretty openly gay there.
So how old were you when you became aware of your queerness, and how long did it take you to begin to explore that openly, or like, I guess, come out to your family or come out to your peer group?
Okay. When I was like 14, 15, maybe even younger, I started thinking about the possibility. I feel like, the identifying as the label gay, I've always been interested in, like, women and femininity. Like, I wasn't ever really super interested in men or boys as, like, a performance. My first real crush was when I was 15 in high school, and I was like, oh, I'm like seriously might be bisexual.
Yeah, that's where it starts.
Yeah, and I was like, I think I might be bisexual. And so it wasn't like something I needed to broadcast to people. Like I never felt like I needed the validation of other people for my queerness to be real. It was always something that I would just explore on my own. But I think short after, I felt open enough, like, because there was the internet, it was MySpace, Tumblr. Tumblr was a huge support in being able to, and giving me all this language and support and feeling like I could talk about my queerness, and there was like, so everyone on Tumblr is gay. So.
Yeah. Can I ask a really dumb question about that? Because I attribute Tumblr to me feeling like I can be gay and like giving me language. What is the importance of, for you, like being in spaces that offer and educate people on how not to be straight? Like, because I heard you say earlier too something interesting. Like all of your language is very interesting to me, and I learn a lot just by hearing you speak about regular stuff. And you said something about straight is the formula, like, and queerness is like we get to be educated on how we can be queer too, as much as like straight people are educated on how to be straight, which is normalized. Can you speak a little bit about that?
I guess we just learn. I learned how to be in relationships by media, like watching TV, movies, like the way that relationships are depicted in those types of like formats. Like it's always the same formula of like monogamous, it's linear. So it's like you meet somebody and you fall in love and then you buy a house, and then you get married and you buy a house and then have kids and then grow old together and send your kids to college. Like, it's always like the story is so linear, when in actuality life is not necessarily linear. Like, especially with queerness, I feel like queerness is everything that exists outside of that linear formula of like relationship and expectation. I think what really changed my life was realizing that you can figure out your own story. It doesn't have to be necessarily the steps that are given to us, you know? So it's like everything that exists outside of what is normal or what is like expected. It's like age. People would expect like somebody who's like in their late 20s, early 30s to start thinking about marriage and everything. But it's like, if you're queer, you can do whatever you want. You don't ever have to get married. You can co-parent, like, and raise a child and never be married and like live in two separate houses and like have like multiple partners. Like, there's so many different like outcomes that can come from queerness, and it's like figuring out how to navigate that in a really healthy way is the work. So
yeah, this is such an interesting conversation to me. I love how you say you can figure out your own story, and as you're talking, I'm being reminded that so many of the rules that we have for relationship come from this linear idea that we place on relationship from the straight perspective, right? Like, you know, you go to school, you meet, you fall in love, you buy a house. You know, just like you said, like there's this predicted path that your life is supposed to take, but queerness doesn't come with any rules, right?
No rules.
Other than the rules that are placed on it by this outside straight perspective. And I've been doing a lot of work with relationship lately. One of the experts that I've been working with says one of the greatest myths and one of the greatest sources of suffering in the world is the myth that relationships are supposed to last forever. And even in the straight context, there's this opening up that linear expectation, even though it's nice on paper, it doesn't necessarily work for people because it's not reality.
Yeah, I mean, the concept of forever is so interesting to me. And, you know, I've been actually thinking about the concept of forever because, you know, when you look at a linear path, it goes straight, you know? Yeah. It's just one long line. But when you look at the infinity symbol, it's curved and it goes into each other and it is infinite. So like there is no way that a straight relationship can last forever because it's going one way. You know, just like
God, that just blew my mind.
Visually, it doesn't make sense. And like, you know, that applies in practice too.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm not opposed to the concept of forever. I think it's interesting. It's eternal, you know? I think there is something important there, and I think love can be eternal, definitely. But it's just, I think
you introduced a really interesting concept to the idea of eternal love, which is expansion and exploration. Because if it's like you say, if it's a linear relationship, it doesn't even match the model of infinity or eternity.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And you know what's coming up for me when I heard you say that is like the concept of linear kind of straight relationship going in a straight line is not infinity. And the infinity love eternally is like 2 people or 5 people or whoever people you're in a relationship with, just reshaping ourselves each day or each month or each year to like be where we are with who we are with in relationship with. And I think the harmful idea of saying that like it needs to continuously evolve upwards, whatever that looks like, whatever people have said like going up means
later.
You know, it's like that is kind of unachievable and unattainable, which is where disappointment happens and like how relationships break down because we're not able to reinvent ourselves on a daily basis and still be in the relationships that we're in. which, I mean, my mind is blown right now. I think that visual can totally change a lot of people's lives.
And I think there's, like, this huge myth that growth is a ladder when it really is just, like, expansion.
Yeah.
And it's really fluid, and sometimes you go backwards, but
and sometimes it contracts.
Yeah.
And there's learning and contraction, and it has to contract in order for it to expand yet again, too. So, yeah, I think you're right. Like, the idea that growth has to look like it's inclining is an ascension. Like, that whole idea of, like, even heaven, we're getting it.
Yeah.
We want to talk about that, like, going up into heaven. We're going into the ground.
I think we're in heaven now. You create your own heaven.
Yeah.
You know, heaven is a feeling. It's not a destination.
Yeah, I love that. It sounds like you were very fortunate in terms of the environment that you grew up in, the environment that you came of age in terms of having the freedom to really explore who you are and explore what that's meant for you. Do you feel like your queerness has ever, do you feel as though you've ever experienced trauma as a result of your queerness?
I haven't necessarily experienced trauma because of queerness, but I have experienced trauma in my life that has forced me to acknowledge my queerness, if that makes sense. I grew up with two older sisters and my mom, and we were like a single parent family. I'm the youngest. So even from like a really young age, I was left home alone all the time. And basically, like, I mean, it's just hard. But I think as an adult now, I've been doing a lot of work to like understand how my patterns are like in relationships, like what my reactions are like, because it bleeds into my intimate relationships, and I like want to do the work to be responsible for myself emotionally. So I've been reflecting a lot in like how I was raised and like what informs who I am. Being the youngest, I definitely was emotionally supporting a lot of my mom's like depression when she got divorced. And so like I ended up absorbing a lot of negative energy from her and like a lot of trauma from her, a lot of pain and grief at a young age. And so when you're really, really young and somebody's just pouring all of this energy into you, it's like I felt emotionally unsafe. I mean, like the way if you look at my childhood from the outside, I was always fed. I had clothes. I went to school. Everything seemed fine. But, like, emotionally, I was always very, very hungry. I was very, very starved of, like, emotional attention, of support. I didn't really know what a healthy relationship looked like between, like, romantically. I was always trying to please because I was really starved for attention. So I would make myself small to please other people, all of these things. So I think in wanting, it also like made me really manipulative too, because I would like manipulate people to get attention when I was younger, as survival, you know, because when you're not getting enough emotional attention or like no one's seeing you that way, it's like it's very difficult. And so I thought about myself a lot. I was really aware that I was really lonely. You know, it made me think about my identity. And it made me also dream a lot about what I wanted. So I always was dreaming about what kind of life I wish I had, what kind of attention I would get, my ideal self would be like. And I think that openness and that creativity really helped me explore queerness when it came up without fear.
Wow. It's so crazy that we weren't really that close in high school, because I literally, I feel like I resonate so much with that story, you know, and seeing, and like all of what you said about the energetic pour of like mom having gone through relationship after relationship and like divorce and like all this stuff, and like what is a healthy family, and looking to TV to figure that out, and saying like, but where do I fit in this? Because like there's a mom and a dad, and kids that are straight. Everyone's straight on TV, and I'm supposed to be in love with
Everyone's
this
rich.
boy. Everyone's rich
on TV.
You know, yeah. And I was left alone a lot because, and I'm an only child for my mom. So all of what you said was so resonating, and I wanted to please people, and I worked so hard to break out of all of that. When you said all of this helped you to acknowledge your queerness, what do you mean when you say that?
I think I just thought about myself. Some people will go through the motions of life without really assessing themselves. I feel like me being really aware of the fact that that I was othered to begin with. I had a single parent family. In the context of this place that we grew up, we didn't have as much money as everybody else.
Yeah,
and
so
it was very clear.
Let's tell people where we grew up. So we grew up in Cerritos, California.
It's a very, very affluent Los Angeles suburb. The population is 90% Asian.
Yeah, wealthy Asians.
Very wealthy Asians. People got Mercedes-Benzes for their
junior year.
for their Sweet 16.
Yeah.
It was very clear that everybody had money. I feel like class and wealth were always very, very prominent and very clear.
Yeah, academies in every corner, which were basically tutoring centers for all of the rich Asian kids. And not only that, I feel like I hung on to a lot of my closest friends in high school were people with full families, if I were to call them that, right? So my best friends had a stay-at-home mom that would cut her fruit every time we came over, and all these things that I love and appreciate my mom so much, but my closest friends are people who had families that I could be a part of.
Yeah, I remember really being comfortable in other people's families. That was a survival strategy for me, definitely, was making myself palatable enough so other families would accept me and want to spend time with me because my own family wasn't spending time with me.
Yeah, totally. I was always the best guest. I know. At the family's house. Yeah. Yeah,
there's definitely clearly a class difference. Class was always a huge thing I was aware of growing up because everyone else would be buying things and had new things and that my sisters and I would end up just feeling bad because we couldn't have the same things, which is in the grand scheme of things is totally fine. We're very, 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 very privileged. So in our experience in that bubble of where we grew up, it felt bad.
Yeah.
I felt ashamed of not having as much as everybody else and created all of these toxic stories I would tell myself, about myself.
Yeah. How do you think that experience of what you said, making yourself palatable enough that other families would accept you, how do you think that experience informs your life as an adult, if it does at all?
First and foremost, gender is performative for me, definitely. So, I think learning how to perform and meld myself to the environment that I'm in order to have the best experience is definitely a skill that I've been working on since I was very young. That's something I still do today. The way that I act with my closest friends is different than how I act when I'm working or when I'm out. That's queerness. It's shifting. It's being fluid. It's I'm not the same person all the time. And I'm not necessarily, I guess the difference now is I'm not trying to make myself palatable for the comfort of others, but I do let different parts of myself out when I'm with certain people because it makes me feel good, There's a distinction on the intention. Yeah, it's intentional. Now the performance is based in what makes me feel good, not what will help me survive.
Yeah. Oh my God. Amen.
So what I'm hearing is that every piece of you, it's authentic to you, but you choose when to unveil different parts of yourself.
Yeah.
Like a performance based on how you want to feel in the experience you're having.
Yes.
That sounds incredible. It sounds like it's really important skill, actually, for people to learn, especially people who don't grow up in such an open environment.
Yeah.
It seems to have really applicable relevance to survival.
Yeah, I'm curious about how you arrived here. And you're not done yet because we're constantly evolving.
Mm-hmm.
But it feels like, because I've known you for so long, and this may be my own perception of it, but it feels like it's all of your life was a blessing in hindsight.
Oh, yeah.
And through it, like through the thick of it, there were times where you were like, Tiff, like, this is really hard. Or, you know, and like, I want the listeners to hear like how these challenges, like how you approach them and what you had to do to go through them and overcome them to arrive where you have now, you know, expressing yourself authentically. And you're constantly evolving. But just like, how did you, you know, you moved to New York and you went to art school there, and it was like a whole thing. And then you had this like journey. So what kind of obstacles did you get to face, you know, in terms, not in your queerness, but tell us a little bit more about things that you have overcome in your young adult life.
I think my life, I have to look at my life as something that's always unfolding, and that I'm noticing, that I'm just like witnessing as it unfolds. So I think the times where it was really difficult for me is when I tried to predict what that was going to be. And I really held on to it in a way that prevented it from unfolding. And that caused a lot of like conflict, internal conflict and struggle. It was really difficult, you know. I think there are also like, there's such a dichotomy, there's such like a weird relationship between feeling like you can control your life and you have no control of your life. And I feel like I'm swinging between that every minute of every day of like, I am in full control and I have no idea. I actually have no control over anything.
Yeah. And sometimes that's the only thing we have control over.
Yeah.
The idea that we don't have any control over.
Yeah. But I found myself like a lot of the time, like there are two things. Like when I try to predict what's going to happen with my life and I'm really, really, really stuck on that idea, that's the only thing that I want. Like, that's when I start to feel disappointment. I don't like to feel disappointed. But like when I place these like unrealistic expectations on myself to do this like by a certain time or that's when I feel like a lot of conflict. And I think that like a lot of the difficulty that I've had like in the past decade is a lot of it has been physical, like physically. Like I've gotten sick. Like I've been on and off chronically ill for the past 5, 6, like 7 years. And I've like gotten sick for long periods of time, like a year and a half. I didn't have health insurance, so a lot of my healing work was really understanding my own body, learning how to take care of myself, researching things, and like being in trial and error until I figured it out. So I didn't have health insurance, so I had to figure it out on my own.
How has acknowledging and being aware of your trauma and healing, like your emotional health, how did you learn how that connected to your physical health?
I mean, I learned very, very quickly because whenever I'm stressed out, my body freaks out. Especially emotional stress shows up on my body very, very clearly. I get rashes. I break out in hives. I feel really, really sick and tired whenever I'm going through something emotionally difficult. And so I think the first time I got really, really sick, it really forced me to have a relationship with my body. It forced me to reckon with a lot of the emotions that had been bottled up in my body for a really long time. Yeah, every time I've gotten sick, it's always been like a huge emotional purge for me. I've always come out of these periods of chronic illness having learned something really deep about myself. I've always come out with so much more healing knowledge on how to eat, like both physically and emotionally take care of myself, which is a huge blessing. Healing is a huge blessing, and it's something that I've always prioritized, and always one of my biggest desires is to heal because I'm a hurt person. Like,
do you ever feel like healing? Because like it sounds like healing can be a destination or it can be a journey. Like
healing is not a destination.
It's not a destination.
Healing is perpetual work, and for me, like healing is also really ugly and super gnarly. Like to me, healing means like going to like the depths of yourself and bringing and pulling out the ugliest parts and bringing those to light and acknowledging them and releasing them. You know, it's hard work, and like I think I've really prioritized that, and I think that's what has been honestly the biggest blessing is being able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the greatest gift that I've given to myself, is prioritizing my own healing, because that leads into everything that I do, all the relationships that I have with people, how I treat myself, how I treat others, how I work. When doing this like really intense healing work with myself, like I end up learning so many new things that I wouldn't learn if I just went through the motions of life, you know?
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Yeah, I'm curious. You know, I grew up in a very conservative and small, closed-minded community. And when I arrived in New York, it was like the whole world opened up before me.
Mm-hmm.
And I became aware then about how drastically different one's experience can be based on where they are. And it sounds like you were fortunate, much in the way that I have the majority of my life, to be in an area where you can freely experiment and explore yourself without punishment, in a way. What do you think is the best way for us to advocate for each other and for other people in our community who aren't afforded such freedom of expression?
I think I didn't understand the meaning of community until I moved to New York. And a lot of my queer and Asian community is there. And that's a community that I've put a lot of energy and time and work into having and intention into having, because it's so important to be around people who can see you, you know? So I guess it's like making sure that the internet exists, so
yeah,
I think it's a lot more accessible now than it used to be, but like making sure you have like people you can talk to about your experience. If I was somebody who lived in a really remote location where people were very closed-minded, I think I would really look to the internet or the spaces that were open and accepting and welcoming of me. And, you know, there are so many pockets of the internet that exist like that. I mean, that's what Tumblr was when we were younger. It's also just identifying what you need. I was feeling like that nobody could understand me, or that there was nobody who looked like me in the place where I lived. I would put it at the forefront of my mind that that's something that I would like in my life. And that's something that I would want, so that when it shows up, I would be ready to accept it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I think in advocating for yourself, it's really identifying what you really need in order to feel good, in order to feel supported. It's really knowing yourself and knowing what you need to really thrive. Is it community? Is it one other person that you can talk to? Is it trying to create a space where you live now? Or is it moving to a new place where your identity will be really widely accepted and you don't have to fight all the time? And if that's not an option, like knowing that there's other options. Deepak Chopra always says, like, if you don't like the choice you made, you can always make another choice.
Yeah.
And I think that is so freeing, because it's like, if you don't like where you're living now, if you don't like the people you're around, you can always make another choice. If that takes a really long time, it's still an option. If it's not easy for you to do that now, like, it's not off the table completely. Like, it's always giving yourself the power to create your life.
Yeah. What I absolutely love about your response is that I asked you how we could best advocate for each other, and you're talking about how we can advocate for ourselves. And I think that is so important. And maybe the way that we best advocate for each other is to teach people how to advocate for themselves.
Yeah, definitely. Because, I mean, that's something I really, truly believe in. One thing I think about all the time is just harm reduction. There's so many harmful things happening in the world all the time. And if I can be responsible for myself and not minimize the level of harm that I cause, then that's the work that I want to be doing. I need to be responsible for myself first and foremost. If everyone was responsible for themselves in a very diligent way, I think it would be very, very clear.
Yeah.
It would make a huge difference. And like, I'm just really grateful that I have the tools and I've done the work, and I'm still doing the work, but I'm like interested in doing the work. I want to do the work and learning how to advocate for myself, learning how to heal myself and be the person that I want to be.
Yeah.
And I think, like, as much as we should take care of each other, I really believe we need to be responsible for ourselves first and foremost, because it's kind of like that whole concept of like making sure your cup is full before you give it to somebody else.
You can't pour out of an empty glass.
Yeah, you can't pour out of an empty glass. And so it's making sure that you are really well taken care of by yourself, like without anybody else. And like knowing what your needs are so that you can communicate. And so you don't further cause any more harm to others.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's really beautiful.
Yeah, thanks for talking with me about this.
I mean, it was so great just to be in conversation with you and hear again like what your perspective is on healing and your perspective is on responsibility. And I learned a lot of things I didn't know about you too, which is really, really cool.
The biggest message I'm taking away from this conversation is how powerful we are in creating the life that we choose. And I think that's such a powerful and important message of empowerment, of not sitting around waiting for someone else to save us, but using our own power, digging deep to find that power within ourselves to really explore what it is we want and what we need, and then to go after it.
Oh, definitely. I mean, one thing I was really thinking about yesterday, I truly believe everybody is a healer. Like everybody has the capability of healing, like whether they're conscious of it or not. Like the human body will heal itself. And so like even if you're not conscious of it, your body heals its own cuts, You don't need somebody else to heal the cut for you. And so just like if there's so much linked with physicality and emotion and spirit. And so like just affirming to yourself that like your body will heal its own cuts, that can happen emotionally, energetically too. Have to do the work and be conscious of it, consciously doing it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, awesome.
On that note, where can people find you, Coco?
You can find me on the internet. My handle is Coco Layne, CocoLayne.
And don't forget to check out Coco Snacks.
Yeah, CocoSnacks, Coco Snacks.
Cool. Thank you for being here. We appreciate you.
Awesome. Yes, thank you. Thank you for taking the time to speak with us. This has been awesome. I actually kind of feel like I need to get on a plane and fly to LA so I can meet you and be friends with you.
Oh my God, I would love to meet you. We're all going to be in New York, but actually Coco won't be in New York next week. But Coco's in New York, so eventually we'll all three have to meet up.
We'll meet up eventually.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. So good to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well. Thank you.